Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet. It is 20 past 12 here in Burrowang in New South Wales in Australia, which is 2 hours out of Sydney. For those of you in Australia, you know, but for those of you overseas, some of you don't know. And today, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Sandy Pardue, who is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I've actually been to Baton Rouge, Louisiana once. I actually went to a Tigers game there, and we can talk about that. That was interesting. But it's a couple of hours drive from New Orleans. Is that right, Sandy?
We're 1 hour. We're 1 hour away. And yesterday was Mardi Gras, by the way.
Oh, well, my couple of hours might have been because I was going to a Tigers game, so it was just like a crawl out and a crawl back in that traffic. But Sandy, it's 20 past 7 on Wednesday evening there in your time. So, Sandy Pardue, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
Well, thank you, David. I'm excited. This is great. I'm just thrilled that you invited me to be on your podcast.
Well, Sandy, as I was saying before we turned the switch on for this, you've been on my radar for some time, and I was first found out about who you were because Dr. Lincoln Harris in Australia had mentioned that you were a big participator on Dental Town and a big contributor on Dental Town. And we've met a couple of times at a couple of events in the United States, but it's been a few years since I've traveled there because of COVID travel restrictions. But it's great to connect, and it's great to welcome you, because one of the things that I always find when talking to people about dentistry and consulting in dentistry, and that's what you do and that's what I do, is that there's a lot of principles that are golden. You know, it's like Jim Rohn says. You know, there's no new there's no new fancy ideas really. It's just sticking to the tried and true. And I think late last year I did one of your webinars, and it was great to hear you just reinforcing that the things that have worked still work. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you today about. You know, your journey, because you've been consulting in dentistry for 25 to 30 years. And
it's a long time.
It is a long time. Yeah, it's coming up to 8 years this year since I hung up my drill, and I'd done some part-time consulting before that. But the principles of customer service, the principles of business excellence, they're the same. You know, even the principles of marketing are the same. It's just different media. But let's talk about, I guess, and we were touching on this beforehand. Let's talk about those principles and what you're seeing out there in the marketplace, what you've seen, and how things are going in dentistry. Because there are different media changes, but again, it's really about sticking to the golden rules and those half a dozen things, as Jim Rohn, that make 80% of the difference.
Exactly. 100%. Well, one thing that hasn't changed, when I think about when I got into dentistry, it was in the 1980s, so the late 80s. And by the time like the early say 1993, I started presenting workshops. I do like a day and a half on scheduling and a day and a half on accounts receivable. When I look at those systems, yes, there are some things that are different, especially the way we track things, right? Because back then we didn't have computers. We had these big appointment books and we had to make tally marks and things like that. So now with technology, we've advanced. But the things that haven't changed are we need structure in practices. Practices need structure, they need organization, they need good management, they need accountability for the team. And most important is that the practice owner, in addition to being the leader, needs to also understand that one of the most important things in the practice is the people part. The people part. So that would be the patients and the team members, the relationships that you're building. And I find that, and there'll be some people in the younger generation that will be listening to this. One thing I'm going to say, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but I find that that dentistry now, that the people part is the focus isn't there like it was, say, 15 or 20 years ago. I think that it was more about relationships and patient retention. And we can go into practices now and see the patient retention at like 50 and 60% if they even know what it is. Like, we'll ask the dentist, I was like, what's your patient retention? Well, I don't know. Why is that even important? I'm getting 100 new patients a month because I am spending a ton on marketing. And so, and so what's happening is that they're spending a ton on marketing. They're getting some new patients and they're going right out the back door. So just imagine if you worked on the relationship aspect of the practice and could close the back door, you wouldn't have to spend as much on marketing. And then those people that love your practice and that relationship with them refer their friends and family. That's how people practiced. And that's what I see that's different now.
Well, Sandy, what you've just said is music to my ears because that's the same hymn book that I've been singing from. And in my practice, I remember when I chose my second consultant to help me after my first one was just a bad match straight away. And 6 months that was over. But my second one, and I remember he said, "We're going to teach you how to love your patients to death." And I knew it. Attending dental meetings, I would hear dentists say, I see this many new patients a month, and yet they had no hygiene. They had no hygiene department. They had no hygienist. They had it was in through the front door, out through the back door, and that is pointless. You're spending all that money and on marketing, and dentistry is about relationships. Once you get somebody out of trouble and they like you, they very rarely will leave you, except if all of a sudden your prices just become too much for their income, or their income circumstances change, or they retire.
Right. And many times, though, they'll try somebody different and end up coming back to the practice.
Exactly. Now, I love it. You'll understand this. As soon as you said that, back in the 80s, it was paper before computers. And I remember I did a renovation in the early 90s, and I thought, somebody said, "Oh, you're going to need a high upstand to hide your cathode ray monitor underneath." And I go, I don't think we'll need computers back then, but how wrong I was. But I remember hearing Scott Luna talk about his tracking and accountability system within his practice. He said we could find where the problem was because everybody had to write something on paper and pass that piece of paper to the next person. So we just look where that paper mounted up.
I was his first consultant.
Oh, there you go. Well, yeah. How's that for a small world? So yeah, he had just he had a back injury back then and had to redefine himself, reinvent himself as a practice owner because he couldn't practice. Yeah. But accountability is really important, and people relationships are important, and I think I was just saying this to somebody today that when when somebody picks up the phone to call a dental practice, they've already decided that your marketing, any marketing, has already helped them determine. Back in the old days, the 80s, there was no marketing. So it was based on, did your name sound like their name, or it came from the same country as them. And that's all that there was. So you had to do the selling on the phone. But now the selling's done beforehand. What happens on the phone is that it gets unsold by unqualified people. They undo it. Don't they realize those people aren't calling for fun? They're not calling because they've got a spare half hour. Oh, let's hear what the dentist is saying. Let's do price. No, it's not about that. They've already made their mind up that they want to come to you, and it's just your job to get them in. And then it's just the practice staff's job, including the dentist, to keep them. And there's so many things, and you're right. And it does make no sense to just be spending money on the before when everybody's leaving quickly. It's acquire a customer, keep a customer. Well, I'm glad that you're identifying this, because with all these multiple generations, like you and I are baby boomers. That's an 18-year wide generation. But now these Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, they're only 4 or 5 years each. They're very narrow, and there's less people in there, so it's hard to categorize them. But understanding that it's about the relationships. One of the most difficult things I think that we're finding down here, and I think in the US as well, is there's not as many people entering the dental workforce as there used to be. Is that are you finding that?
Yeah, it's the same here. In fact, I noticed when I was driving, I went by my office today and I was driving back home, and there's a dental office near my home, and there's a big banner with 2 poles, and it says dental assistant needed, dental assistant needed. These big banners, they're orange and black and that, I was like, okay. So definitely, I think that's true. We have to recruit them. But, back to what you're saying too, I always, when I'm training teams, I want them to think about, like, where does treatment acceptance start? A lot of people think treatment acceptance starts with the patient in the chair, and it doesn't. It could start maybe over the back fence, talking to your neighbor about where they go for dentistry. It could be what they see when they drive up. I took my granddaughters to the orthodontist, and I mean, he's got a pretty good reputation, but I couldn't help but notice, I drove up and all the bushes in front of this office were dead. It was just little stick, and trash everywhere. And I'm thinking, I start to form an opinion. I think so it starts even before the first phone call. And then another thing that I find that happens in practices, and I see this now more than ever, is a lot of dentists firing their patients. Now, where I come from, in fact, I asked my doctor, we were giving a seminar, and I remember he was walking to the back of the room, and I said, "Oh, I want to ask you a question. How many patients have you fired?" And he turned around and he looked at me and he's like, "Fire a patient? Why would I do that?" So I think that what we try to do is train our clients to be able to identify, like, why are they upset? Like, instead of just saying, "Oh, that patient's crazy. They called and they're mad because of our insurance. Her insurance didn't pay enough." Well, look at the system in the practice and find out why. What happened? What were they told? Have you incorporated something on the bottom of the treatment plan that it's just an estimate that, who is really responsible for the bill? They are, what was communicated. Promises that were made and not kept, or think about the last time you were doing business with someone and they didn't deliver what you paid for, what you were supposed to get, and how did you feel? You wanted to communicate. So people want to communicate. So you wonder why they are not coming back to your practice, or why they're not paying when they always paid. And now you can't get them even to come in. So there's likely an upset. Don't fire them. And here's something to think about. I figured this out. I was just driving home one day and I'm thinking, because I'm big on retention, like, you've got to retain more patients. If there's 177,000 dentists in the United States, I don't know what it is today, but let's just say it's 177,000. It's very close to that. I know that. And you can say every practice gets at least 10 new patients. So if I'm giving a presentation, I'll ask, how many of you get 50 new patients? They raise your hand. How many get 5? But most people get 10 or more. And I think you'd agree, patients a month, 10 or more. That's 1.7 million people changing dentists every single month. That is insane. That should get every listener's attention. It's like they get that, like, what are we doing in our practice? This is out of control. What, you get that new patient, whose share were they in last time? What happened? I don't know, just something to think about there.
It's funny you should say that, because I've never thought of it on a countrywide per month basis. That's 1.7 million per month. So multiply that by 12. That's like 10 million.
What are people doing in their patients that they want to leave? What's happening here? Oh, you know what else? Let me just throw this in here. I want to see what you think about this. Okay. In my world, now, of course, I'm in Southern United States, and we're, manners, that's very important. We still put china out and sterling silver on the holidays, it's like, and we send thank you notes. Okay. And not thank you emails, because everybody, look at your emails. You might not have this problem. I am good about checking mine, but another thing I do in my presentations is have people take out their cell phones, tell me how many unread emails you have. I get people with 50,000 dental people, 50,000 unread emails. Okay, so you're telling me that when a patient refers friends and family to the practice, you're going to send them an email. Well, they're likely not going to open it, because I have read that like 28% are opened. And no, what about a little note that the doctor signs if somebody refers someone to your practice? What happened? That has fallen out. People look at you like you have 3 eyeballs when you even suggest that. And it works, though. It works. That is part of building the relationships.
Well, it works because it's different, it's unexpected, and it feels good. And Sandy, I don't know if it's because, well, people are still mailing parcels to each other, so there's always that excitement that the Amazon parcel's going to arrive, the FedEx parcel's going to arrive.
Yeah.
But as children, we were always excited when it was our birthday, like we were getting cards from people in the mail. So it's if something comes in the mail that you're not looking for, it's like, oh, it's a surprise. Sometimes I get one for Jane and I, and I'll say, we better open this together. Who's this from? It's a surprise.
Right.
I've even got an ex-patient who moved to Queensland 8 years ago, and he sends me articles from the Queensland newspaper. He puts them in the post and posts them to me, and we thank goodness he's not on social media, but he texts me a lot as well, and sends me photos, and just keep in touch. And when we go to Queensland to watch my football team play, he comes to the games. There's 4 teams up there, so he tries to get to one of those games as well. But it's that keeping in touch and doing the unexpected thing,
right.
That really helps people feel good. So you're right, thanking your patients for referrals.
Yeah, I don't even care even if it's not a handwritten note. People aren't even doing that anymore. Like, that was something that was done just standardly, and now to find people to do it, it's like, huh? It's like,
well, it's nice. I often ask, who was your best referrer, or who is your best referrer? And in my practice, the best referrer for me, one of my patients was a realtor, and he had a dentist who was renting rooms that he managed the rent roll. This dentist was closing down the practice because he let it run down, and the dentist's wife had died, and he just said, I'm just going to go and work for one of the insurance companies, and I'm going to close it down. And so my patient said to him, he said, you should talk to David. So he turns up at my door. His practice office is about 100 yards around the corner from mine. And he said, I'm going to wheel over my filing cabinet. So he put it on a trolley and wheeled it over. And he said, I'm going to get my phone diverted into your system. And I said, how much do you want for that? And he said, just look after those people. He said, there's not many of them. Just look after them. And so we sent those, his filing cabinet, the people on, it was a Kalamazoo system. So we sent them all a letter and said, we have a hygiene, we're different. We have a hygienist. We only do white fillings. We charge more, but we'll be looking after you. And about 40 of those people ended up staying long term. And between those 40 people, they spent $880,000 over the next 4 years, because this guy never did posterior restorations other than patches. And these people all said, and they were all older than me, they said, I can chew now. I feel really happy that you have helped me get over this hurdle, and now I'm really enjoying my food. But my best referrer was the realtor, just doing his job. So you never know, it's not somebody's going to refer like for like. And that referral cost me, I think, about $1,000 worth of red wine as a gift to my realtor. He said, you really should have bought me better than that. And 6 bottles of good red wine. But yeah, so you never know those thank yous and just those relationships that you have with your patients as to where they're going to do, what they're going to do in terms of who's going to turn up. By the same token, that same realtor, I had a realtor turn up as a patient. I said, do you know him? He said, yeah, I know him. So they never referred each other. There was no referral there. But so sometimes you can get 2 people sit in the same office and they don't say they're going to the same dentist. So, but you've got to keep the conversations up.
No, but a lot of, even if you go on social media and in some of the Facebook groups or on Dental Town, and you see so many of the dentists that have been practicing for a short period of time, like not loving dentistry, like we used to not ever hear that years ago. And I think if they paid more attention to some of those relationships, they might enjoy it a little bit more. It can be fun, because they will even say, I don't talk to my patients. I go in there and just get it done and get out of there. And team members will tell me that about their doctor. It's like, he's just not personable with our patients. So I think that that's something that all the listeners could really, really take note on that, and, work on those relationships. And it could be even like welcoming patients that come in. And one thing that we always say, we like our patients to be scheduled, new patients, within the first week or 7 days when they call. And Amazon has really, it has all of us, like, we want it now, right? It's like, we want things now. If I decide I want my hair cut, I don't want to wait 2 weeks. People finally get the nerve. And I say this, and not lightly, because nobody has patients lined up outside their practice waiting to get in. People don't love to come to the dentist, right? You agree with that, right? It's like, so this is another reason, like, why are they choosing our practice? What are they going to get here that they can't get next door? And the practice that I managed for many years, now, when he sold his practice, and it's been 15 years, he was doing 2.8 million back then, solo, no marketing, and 1 or 2 insurances back then. It was just really getting into insurance. And by the way, Lincoln came and visited that practice. He sure did. He came and visited that practice. But all the other dentists were wanting to get near him. Like, they would build their office across the street or next door, thinking, man, if I can get under those clouds, then maybe I can be successful like that. And that's just not how it works. What happens within your own 4 walls is going to determine your success. And those relationships that you build are going to make a difference. And you train your team to have that same mindset about the patients, speaking to them hello and telling them goodbye. And all of those things are really important.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw a post on social media about a dentist who was doing something really weird that I knew was not going to work. And so I posted, I said, where is this office? I'll like to set up next door, because there'll be people leaving there looking for a dentist straight away. It's better to set up against somebody who's bad, because as dentists, and you'd know this from where you worked and the practices that you've worked with, and Lincoln would know it as well. Sometimes you get a new patient, you look in their mouth and you go, oh, it's horrible in there. And you say, tell me about your last dentist. Oh, he was such a nice man. He was such a nice man. And so it's not really about the quality of the dentistry. You can be the best dentist and people still leave you. You can be the worst dentist and people will still say, oh, he's such a good dentist. In fact, down here, we had a president of our dental board, and every dentist who saw this president's work couldn't understand how he rose to such fame, because it was just overhang city in terms of all the restorations. But yeah,
but he understood the people part of practice, and you have to find something to admire in everyone. I mean, that's really when you have a patient and maybe they come in and they rode a big Harley and they're full of hair, and maybe they have gold chains hanging down or whatever's happening with them. There's something good about that person. You just have to find it. There's something there to admire, and not everybody's bad. There's a lot of it. There's not everybody's bad. Okay.
Even Sandy, I can remember I got a patient who was so, on the first visit, we established that we voted differently. And he just said to me, he said, it's obvious that you and I don't agree on politics. He said, but I'm looking for a really great dentist. And so if we can just keep the politics out, he said, I'm sure you and I are going to get on just fine.
There you go.
And so, I always think with politics, there's always got to be somebody who votes different from me, and that just negates me straight away. So I'm only one vote, in an ocean. I'm a drop in the ocean in terms of politics, and really doesn't matter about that. But there's some things that you don't talk about. You don't talk about. You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about religion. But you can talk about how's your family, and even a family question can be bad. I remember once asking a patient, an older man than me. I said, and a simple man. And I said, do you have any brothers or sisters? He said, yeah. He said, I had a sister. He said she was murdered by her boyfriend. So you don't know when you're going to get an answer like that. But, family, occupation, recreation, dreams and desires, it's pretty easy to just strike up a conversation. How do you talk to people? Just ask them questions.
That's right.
If you ask them, they'll talk, and they'll just keep talking. If you just keep asking, tell me more about that. That's it. Just tell me more. How was that? How did that make you feel? You can strike up a conversation, and you never told them anything about you.
But another part of that is being able to know how to end that conversation, because then your hygienist is standing there with her hands on her hips. It's like, wait a minute. So there's an art to that. My boss, Dr. Westerman, he was the best at that. I mean, he could go in 3 minutes. They felt so acknowledged, but there were little systems in place. So the hygienist who had spent time with that patient, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever, would find out little good nuggets about that patient and make notes, right? So that when she went to summon the doctor, they put in a pool, she's pregnant, he got a promotion, and he would go in right with that. And they would be like, whoa, boy, how'd you know that? So that saved a minute or two right there. So being able to have them feel acknowledged and cut it off so you can actually get them to open their mouth and do the dentistry. So that's important too. Yeah, it's just so important.
Yeah. I know Jane and I have when we go out, we have to establish a code word of how do we change the conversation? Ask a question. Yeah. When I mention this question, we got to change subject straight away because it's going down the wrong path. But you're right. It is very important to know. Yeah, and everybody in your office knows the timing, or should. And the doctor is important, especially in the hygiene room. You've got to be in at a certain time, out at a certain time. Otherwise, really good point. Because hygiene timing, hygiene room timing is it's the backbone of the practice. If the hygienist runs overtime or the doctor talks too much, the rest of the day just falls apart because all of a sudden everyone's playing catch up. So you've really got to have systems in place in your practice that allowed that hygiene team to run on time and be on time.
And that's another thing that hasn't changed, okay, over the years. Like when you compare like things like years ago to now, you have to have systems and you have to have a trained team. Those things have never changed, and I cannot see them changing. If anything, they're more important now than ever before. So, and that also goes with that patient retention and that people part of the practice, letting those team members know your expectations for them. And people like that, by the way. Sometimes dentists get uncomfortable when they have to talk to a team member about their jobs and what they need from them. They get uncomfortable. But from what I've seen, and I've worked with over 600 practices over the years. And so I've trained a ton of people. So they want to know what they're supposed to do. They want to do a good job. Most people do. Yeah,
absolutely. I had it in my office. The question was there in my mind in my office, and it's always there when I'm working with clients as well, as to how dentistry has evolved to be such a situation where the practice owner allows dentists to come and practice the way they want to within their practice, and then team members to do what they want to. And it was interesting. Jane sold one of her phone masterclasses, and she does an onboarding call, and she had the team there, and there were 7 chairs practice, and the receptionist, Jane said, "What's your standard greeting when we answer the phone?" And they said, "We don't have one." And Jane said, "You know what my next question is? Do you have any systems down the back as well?" And they said, "No, we don't." And I said, "Jane, you've just found the 7 dwarfs. There's 7 different types of dentists practicing this." And I said, "But who sold that dentist on build a practice where you have 7 different types of dentists working there? And there's no systems." And somebody says, "Oh, you're busy. Put on another room." Well, it's another room of underproduction, underutilization. And they think that in this big problem, they confuse activity with accomplishment and achievement, and they're 2 totally different things.
Exactly.
But
yeah,
remember the old days when the rep used to come around and talk to the dentist? So the reps would say, "Oh, that dentist down the road, he's never busy." And I'm thinking, well, if he's doing a full arch in the morning and a full arch in the afternoon, you're not going to see one patient in that dentist waiting room. So, and he's doing good.
And it'll be very productive. Yeah.
Very productive and less very low stress, because he's only seeing 2 patients a day. So but you can see one every 15 minutes. I think that there's still dentists out there who don't want to do more than 1 procedure per appointment because they feel like the patient will think they're overcharging if they do 2 fillings side by side.
Yeah, I have heard people say things like that. That's not the world I come from, but yeah.
Well, if any dentist asks any patient 2 things, as a practicing dentist, if I found decay on the tooth beside and I said, "Look, there's decay on the tooth beside, do you want to come back for that, or do you want to do it now?" He says, "It's numb, do it now." They all say that 100% of the time. And
exactly.
And the other question is, I can do this procedure in 3 hours, or I can do it in 2. Which would you prefer? They never say, "I've got all day, take 3 hours." They say, and they never say, "Is it going to be cheaper if you do it in 2?" They just say, "Do it in 2." Every patient wants to get out quickly. So there you've got efficiency and efficiency with time, and disregard of cost is important for the patient. The other one, and I don't know if you've seen it but dentists were always taught never to numb both sides of the patient's mouth at the same time. Especially the mandible. If you've got to do fillings, you've got to do them on 2 different appointments. And it was Dr. Anissa Holmes who said to me, she said, her husband was an oral surgeon, and he said, "Well, I've taken out all in one go, and nobody's ever bitten their tongue, choked, died, or anything from being numb." And she goes, he said, "Why don't you do that when you're doing fillings?" It was such a time saver, and again, and all the patients
appreciate that. Time is important to everybody, right? It's like get in and get out. Sure.
Very, very important in terms of being respectful of patients' time, and so that comes back to. And you were on time today. Like my good friend Dr. Scott Peterson used to tell me, his father used to drum into him, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late.
Right.
And it's something that I always try to be on time as much as I can, and be mindful that it can ruin everybody else's day. So
I think that's very important. And that goes back to what we were talking about, the people part of practice. And, actually I was at the doctor, and the ladies were there was something going on. And I asked them, I said, what are y'all talking about? I mean, they were doing it in front of me, which they should not have been. They said, oh, this patient came late and she wants us to still see her. And I'm thinking to myself, every time I've been to this place, I have waited an hour, and I didn't say it. So I know why the lady came late, because they're always running late, right? So now she thinks I'll just come late. That's how patients think. That's why you need to run on time.
exactly, and when doctors are sometimes the worst at it in terms of turning up late. I used to, at my practice, you have to be early, especially first thing in at the start of the day. I didn't want to be walking in and there'd be patients there before me, so I'd be there 20 minutes before.
And they see you drive up.
Well, they see you run in and you're still you're still straightening your tie. I've had people like that. People turn up with their hair not done for work as well. The time that the plane is due to take off, the pilot's already been there for half an hour before doing his instrument check, and it should be the same in a dental practice. The time that they say on the train timetable, that's the time you see the back of the train. It's gone. You've got to be there before that time.
Absolutely.
And we've got to be like that in dentistry as well. And that goes back to, making that hygiene appointment. Now, sure, things go wrong. Sometimes you can't get a matrix band, you can't get isolation, can't get the tooth numb. I worked out if with a block that it was quicker to give 2 blocks at the same time, like bang, bang, and then the patient didn't mind as long as they were numb. It was fine, because sometimes I never worked out whether the second block worked because I got it in the right spot and the first one not, or I pushed the anesthetic from the first one into the right spot. But it worked for me, rather than say, is that numb? And 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, no, it's not. So then you already dropped 2 or 3 minutes. So
right.
Double numbing never was an issue with me, and patients appreciated that. And same doing an upper quadrant. By the time you'd numb 4, 5, 6, and 7, as we call them, the premolars and then the molars. By the time you put that last injection down, you're ready to pick up the drill and just go on those first ones. So again, patients like I said, nobody wants to be in there 1 minute longer than they have to be.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
How do you see, with the manpower shortage, Sandy, how do you see that? This is where that question was too. You'll know who posted the question, because I think he posted it in multiple groups. He said, I've got a practice and they're either contemplating AI or offshore employment for answering the phone. And I said, that's the practice I'm going to set up beside, because people want to go to a practice and as a new patient and be greeted by somebody who says, hi, my name's Jane. I spoke to you on the phone. Welcome to our practice.
Exactly. Here's the thing. I know myself. I don't want to sound like I shop a lot, but I guess I do. I was like,
nothing wrong with that.
I bought a purse, and I paid for the purse. It was going to be shipped. And then I never heard anything about it. And I'm like, what's the deal? And it was around Christmas time, but it was right after Christmas. It was kind of something I was getting for myself. And so, but I was also traveling to Orlando to the PodFest, which is the dental PodFest. And I thought that would be a perfect bag. So I could not get anybody. I could not get anybody on the phone. So I'm emailing. I'm trying, no, nothing. So finally I I don't know how I found this number one day and I called it, but it was AI. And we just went round and round and round with, the computer, the girl. And I'm like, it's frustrating is what this is. And finally somebody answered my email, but I don't know. I think this is what we have to remember in dentistry. And I said it earlier and I'll say it again. No practice has patients lined up waiting to get in. Less than half the people go to the dentist every year. This is dentistry. It's not like something that people want. Okay. It was king cake season here. King cake is a Mardi Gras cake. Okay. It's between Christmas and Mardi Gras, it's like these king cakes are very popular. They're at the grocery stores, they're at the bakeries, and there's a little baby hidden in it, and it's like a big thing. There's a place in New Orleans where you wait 2 hours to get in there. Okay. People wait 2 hours to buy a king cake. Now, dentistry is not like that. People don't want to wait. People don't. So that's what every practice owner needs to realize, that in dentistry, we have to work a little harder. And that is where that phone call connects that patient. That relationship starts right there. Then when that person calls, and we already know that the three main objections with patients are that they're unaware of need, that they're scared, right? And they have financial considerations. So we already know that. So somebody calls and they have a toothache and they connect with that person on the phone. I'm so glad you called. You called the right place. We're going to be able to help you. And I'm looking forward to meeting you. And all of those things that are said where that relationship starts with that person was really, they could have been scared. I mean, you can hear it in their voice when you listen to these phone calls, that person is afraid to go to the dentist. So, I'm not a big fan. I think that's one of the most important positions in the practice, face of the practice.
It is, and Jane listens to calls of officers that we work with, and we still have employees who answer the phone, and the first time they find out the caller's name is when they're entering their name into the software 7 minutes after they've had a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And even if it's a practice dealing with children, they don't find the name of the person who's making the appointment. I need to make an appointment for my daughter. What's your daughter's name? Who am I talking to? Was it Carnegie who said that a man's name to himself is the sweetest sound in the language? If you find out somebody's name and just repeat it back all the time, Sandy, people love to hear their own name and that recognition of who they are. And so the AI doesn't ever do that.
No. I tried. I was playing around with one recently where I was like, I'm scared to come in. I'm so afraid. And she didn't know what to say, so they might improve it, but I was really messing around with it. It's just like,
was that AI or a person that you were?
It was AI. And I was pretending to be the patient. And I just wanted to see how it was going to react, how the AI on the other end. And of course, but I do know, like a patient calls. I was just listening to a call recently where it was a gentleman and he was like, do you have a way to finance it? And she goes, what do you mean? Like she did, like, do you like cosign? And so that she didn't really know, but this was a real call. Okay. And so I'm listening like AI. I want to try that one on AI. Cause he was like, and he said, that's what he said. Didn't say finance. He said, is there somebody to co-sign it for me? And so AI, I bet you will not know what to do with that one. But what he meant was care credit or some third party financing.
Yeah, of course. And it's interesting, if whoever set up that AI where they didn't recognize I'm scared, that I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of patients are scared, even if they don't even
They don't
say
tell
it.
you though. They don't tell you. Most people will not tell you.
Mm.
Some will, but most people aren't going to, especially a male, you know, a male that needs a root canal or a crown isn't going to say, I'm not really looking forward to this. So you have to assume it though, when you're presenting the treatment plan.
Yeah, of course, all the time, all the time. Um, yeah, because you don't know. Assume until they tell you, look, I'm easy with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I did have some patients who never had injections. I don't know how they did it, but more older patients, and maybe that's just how they were brought up. But most patients, as I mentioned, happy to be number than less numb than needed. You know, it's much, you know, might be feel worse afterwards.
I think that because you asked about like the shortage of people, but you know what I'm seeing is I think it's loosening up a bit. Just last week, I had a client that was needing to replace somebody, and he was scared to do it. He's like, you know what, I'm not going to be able to find anybody. Da 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 da. I said, let's just try. So we put an ad in, and he got, actually we did two. We did two, one for dental assistant, one for front office. And one of them got like 60 something responses, 180 something. Out of those, there were only 3 people that we wanted to interview. And we went through every resume. And you know what? We ended up hiring 2 of them. And oh, did I mention that it was within 3 days?
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think it's getting better in some parts of the country. And I don't think it. I know I'm seeing it. It's getting better. And this is just a time that maybe the dentists need to look outside of dentistry to recruit and be ready to train.
I've got a client who does that, brings them in, you know, somebody who works in a grocery store or a hardware store, or even a liquor store, and
Yeah.
they come with a mindset that you know, customer focused mindset. And the number one comment she gets from these people is, "I didn't know dentistry was going to be so interesting to work in," which sometimes we
And
get in
great
our review.
hours. Great hours.
Well, I think hours are important, and we could talk about this. You know, I had another client who, when she came to me, every day had a different start and a different end time for the week, and somebody had told her, "Well, you've got to be everything to everybody." And I said, "But you're not being anything to your staff, because every week they don't know what time they're starting or ending." And the other thing that this office did was they said, "Oh, we've got a space in the afternoon. We've got someone who needs treatment now, so everybody can go to lunch later in the afternoon." And I thought, you're starving your staff to death. What if they've got a doctor's appointment or they're meeting somebody? You've just
No.
turned them into animals, into farm
I'm
animals.
wondering about that person's staff retention. Were they
Wasn't good.
retaining staff?
No, wasn't good. And so now everybody starts at the same time, finishes at the same time, 5 days a week, and she's had no disrespect from patients about that. You know, about, "Oh, why aren't you doing late nights anymore?" She said, "Well," you know, and the easy line for that is, you know, Doctor So and So now has children that she has to get home to, or Doctor So and So
Right.
doesn't work weekends because she's got children, and people, "Oh, okay, understand." So it's just that standard thing. It used to be the same with us going to the bank. Still the same going to the bank. Yeah, opens at 10, closes at 5.
Yeah.
That's it. 5 days a week, not on weekends. That's
Right.
it. And there are some things that we need to do to respect our team so that they can have a life outside of dentistry, but they'll give you 120% during the
Absolutely.
time that you're looking after them as well. Now, your boss, you said, who just retired 15 years ago, that you work for, um, he would have had a good staff retention, as you said. What were some of the things that he did there that you've now carried on to help
Oh,
your client?
organization. Or when I mean this guy, he was doing things that people want now. You know, back years ago, he had procedure manuals. There, I mean, like you wouldn't even believe everything was in writing, like everything. So when your first day there, you got like a 6-inch binder. It's like you learn this, you know your job, and just the level of organization was tremendous. And so that he made it like he was a natural teacher, like you just wanted to learn from him. and our staff meetings, like the staff meeting day, to go over how the office was doing and what we needed to improve, and the training. It was exciting. I was telling somebody the other day, on those days we'd even like wear a skirt and high heels. It's like we'd dress up a little bit because it was staff meeting day, and that was the day we were going to really look at our systems and work on everything. The most organized practice. You could hear a pin drop. One lady came from Japan 2 times to see that practice. I mean, we had people come from everywhere, and he'd see about 45 patients a day. We had 3 to 4 full-time hygienists. He worked and he sold his practice at age 78. Okay. People think, oh, did he need the money? No, he was passionate about dentistry. He kept working till he was 85. Yeah, he kept seeing patients in the practice. And he told me not long ago, I shouldn't have stopped. And I said, yes, you should have. It was just like, it was time. Enjoy yourself. I mean, this man just loved dentistry. And so, and you knew it. To work for him was one of the best things that ever happened in my whole life. And that's how people feel, because you learned something all the time. It was just a great teacher. And having the tools there was just tremendous. Yeah. So we were keeping those statistics back then. And we had them all over the wall, because remember, I mean, we didn't have software. We were one of the first offices in the United States in 1988 to have software and be scheduling on the computer. That was like a big deal. But he had 5,000 patients, and just a tremendous practice, really organized, and a great clinician. He had 6 patents in the dental field. So, yeah. He invented the metal lift crown and bridge removal system, which you don't hear too much about. He sold the company like 2018, and with so many crowns, like you had to have metal in the crown to remove the crown. It's called metal lift. So you porcelain fused a metal crown. You could take it off, do a root canal, and then he had a little key to repair it and put it back. And you could take it off again if you needed to and put it back. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wow. One of the things that you touched on there, in terms of that 6-inch binder, day one. I know my daughter went to for a training with an office supply company, and they had a 10-week onboarding system, and
Right.
it was 7 weeks before she actually got into a stall.
Wow.
Whereas in dentistry, it's kind of like first day you're dealing with, you as an employee, you're dealing with patients, you're answering phones, and you haven't been taught the systems. And I keep saying, and 7 weeks before she got to deal with a customer, and she's only selling pens. She's not talking about dentistry and health. So why is dentistry and health so training poor? We'll train as you go, as opposed to and I guess because it was a big organization, they can just keep.
Right. That is a long time. That we would have them there a day. And there's, we had like routing in checklist, give you this, and have them do all of that before they ever started. So it was usually by day 2, they were ready to get into that position. Unless it was a technical position, they'd get in a lot sooner.
Yeah. But it's interesting how, again, it comes back to no system for onboarding, and no system for training. And
the level of organization was tremendous. I mean, we had a checklist for everything. A new employee coming in, new employee leaving, or an ex-employee leaving, or anything you can imagine. If we would write it up, anything that worked well would be written up.
Through my practice, I bought or inherited, and I told you about the one I inherited that was gifted to me, but I bought my neighbour's practice when he, in the rooms next door, when he retired. And then another dentist rang me and said, there's a dentist, a mile away. He's selling a practice, and it was a main road, and it was just it was a standalone. And I looked at his numbers, and I thought, this guy's underutilising this site. But one of the things that he had there, and it was only him and one assistant who did everything, and he had checklists for everything that was done during the day, and he did none of it. So everything had to be ticked off by her, like unlock the front door, turn on the power, turn on the compressor, turn on the computers. And
at least he knew what they were doing.
Well, That's accountability. But big organizations, big practices get by, and people say, oh, that wasn't my job to do that. Whose job was it to turn the worst one? The answering machine is still on halfway through the morning.
Yeah, not good.
Or they're not checking. They turn the phone off, but they don't check the messages till mid-morning. They wonder why the first patient hasn't shown up. Well, they left a message.
Yeah, not good.
So there is so much in dentistry that is still very, as much as AI is supposedly replacing a lot of tasks in administration and other things, dentistry is still a people person.
It is.
One of the best pieces of advice I got from a patient. I actually got from a patient in 1984. He said to me, dentistry is the last bastion of free enterprise. And I still believe today the solo practitioner still has that opportunity, because you can build a practice that people will come to because they're looking for that sort of practice. They're looking for that personal relationship. Yeah. And sure, there's the corporates where people just want in and out quick, or and the worst ones, the $20 check up and clean. So the patient.
But I'm telling you, their retention is very low. Their retention is more dreadful. Like 30 and 40%.
Dreadful. And there's some serious problems there. But if you build a practice that people want to come to and stay and refer, you can run a practice like your doctor. The beauty of dentistry compared to a bakery, if you've got a bakery, you got to bake bread 7 days a week. People eat it 7 days a week. But dentistry, you can cut it back. I'm only working 3 days a week now. I'm only working 2 days a week now.
That's right.
You will still maintain that practice in that time, as long as you do good dentistry and you've got a backup in case there are emergencies on the days when you're not there. That's all.
And I believe that. And it's 2025 right now, and we're having this conversation, and both of us have been in dentistry for years, decades. In 2025, you can still have the practice of your dreams. And I think that's important for the listeners you can have it. You need to have structure in your practice. You need to have organization. You need to work on your team, do a team inventory. If you're stressed out, look at your current team, see who you need to replace. Make sure you've offered training to them first. That's the one thing I always ask myself. If somebody's underperforming, what have I not done? What have I not done to make sure they have everything they need to do a good job? And oftentimes when you ask yourself something like that, you can find, you know what, maybe you haven't done all that you could do to help that person.
It's really, really important. And I remember Jane telling me this about something that was non-dental, and a conversation I'd had with someone. And she said, you can't be disappointed that they haven't responded the way you wanted them to, because they've responded how you've told them, or what you haven't told them has caused their response. So look at your communications first. So you're absolutely right. You can't just expect somebody to just come in if you can't train them, if you haven't trained them. And behave. Sometimes you do get somebody who just adapts really, really well, but more often than not, you have to train them to how you want. My best ever receptionist left and had a baby, and then came back, resigned and had a baby, and then came back a couple of years later, and she took a job as a dental assistant in my practice, and I just couldn't work with her as a dental assistant. It was just 2 right feet all the time. But then somebody on the front desk left, and she went back to the front desk and stayed on for another 4 or 5 years before she then went home to New Zealand. And it was like she was just made to be a receptionist. So again, it's sometimes you can have the right person in the wrong position as well in your practice.
Oh, yes, that can happen. Most definitely.
Well, Sandy, we're coming towards the end of our time, and like I said at the start, we probably could talk for hours and hours and hours, because we have, despite the fact that we're separated by a large amount of water and a huge time difference, dentistry is the same. The principles of business in dentistry are the same. We've shown in this conversation that it's the same, whether we're talking about practicing in the 80s or the 90s or the 2025, that the principles are about looking after your people and training your people and having accountability and being a good leader And like I said, it's a shame to cut it short because of time. We could talk for days on this, and I know you can. But Sandy Pardue, thank you very much for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
It's classicpractice.com is the website. Classic, like a classic car, practice like you practice the piano.com.
Classic Practice, and there's a place there to talk to you.
Yes,
or
or my individual email is Sandy with a Y, Sandy at classicpractice.com.
Perfect. Well, Sandy, again, thank you so much for taking time on this evening of yours. It's come up to 20 past 8 now, I think, your time. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And I certainly enjoyed it. Thank you for having me, David.
No, lovely to catch up. And I've got a couple of events in the US that I do want to get to. You mentioned one, the dental podcast event in January in Orlando.
Fabulous.
Yeah,
it's fabulous.
I'd like to put that on my
There'll be another one next year. You have no idea what that is. Oh my goodness. There's a dental part, but then there's hundreds of other people that give podcasts from around the world. And there was a round table, so you could go in and meet them, and you could talk to them, and then switch tables. And it was unbelievable. They would be a fireman, or somebody that rescues dogs, or it was just unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, that's January, and that's a good time to visit because it's not too hot in Florida at that time. So,
no, it's really nice. Yeah.
And it's in Orlando too. So
in Orlando,
plenty of things to do in Orlando.
Yeah.
Before and after. Yeah. No, that'll be great. Well, Sandy, thanks again for being a guest. I've really enjoyed it, and appreciate you taking your time to share your wisdom with my listeners and viewers, and look forward to catching up very, very soon.
Sounds great, David. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.